We were eating at Cattleman's Steakhouse, and we met Betty's mom at the Cattleman's, and this is maybe a year before we went into business, maybe a year and a half. And she was an entrepreneur and a very smart lady, and she pointed us towards an article that was in the newspaper, or maybe a magazine, and it was talking about Tyson coming into Holdenville and building the giant feed mill, and that they were going to have these locations. And she said, she called us kids because she was older than us, but she said, I think you kids ought to look at this. This might be something you want to go into, because she knew that we were in the cattle business and that we were just really treading water. We were making some money, but we didn't have enough heads. We ran 100 to 125 Angus mamas. We went into business, our barns were finished in 1991. Man, this was probably, late 89 or 1990 whenever we were actually talking. As I say, we went to Holdenville, talked to John Thomas. The numbers looked good, and we decided to step off the cliff. And it was a good step. She always wanted a job where she was compensated for how hard she worked. So she had her radar up for her own business, and whenever the Tyson thing came along, we had the land, we had the water, we had a perfect location. It drained well, everything was good, and then she became, I guess you'd say, a business owner. We originally started with 4 barns, and about 6 or 8 months later, increased that to built another 2, because we knew we had a full-time hand, and he needed some more work, and the extra 2 were obviously going to make us more money. It was another bank payment, but hey, we could make it, you know. Now, we did expand, and I lose track of time, but I'm going to say it was the late 90s, whenever Tyson had a farm out in Lamar. It was still in Hughes County, but it was on the other side of Hughes County from our original location. And we went over and looked at this place, and it was completely run down. It had been mismanaged, and every system on it needed work. Everything from the feed system, electrical, the ventilation. It was just a complete mess, and Tyson wanted Betty and I to buy it. And we looked at it and said, no, I don't think so. It was just, we weren't being negative, it was just going to be a lot of work. But Tyson came back and was talking to us, and I know why Tyson wanted it. It was because Betty is an extremely good manager. We made it, completely rehabbed it. The following spring, maybe early summer, that farm opened in Lamar, and it had 6 buildings with 6,000 finishing pigs or hogs in it, and the rest is history. We had 12,000 hogs to feed and take care of and medicate and load, and you know that story.
She bought a 3rd swine facility that we regulated, and that swine facility, when she bought that swine facility, had a number of environmental issues that needed to be either some construction work done or numbers of things to be done, so the waste was more properly handled. In a matter of less than a year, she was able to go in and to change that swine feeding operation so it was not only a workable, more functional operation, but an operation that we never sent a letter on from the day she took it over. Never sent her a letter of any notice of violations. She's changed it from being an operation that had some environmental issues to having next to no environmental issue problems at all.
She thought that was an everyday thing, is how you should run your business, be a good steward of the land, and take care of the environment, as well as taking care of your people, taking care of your animals.
It was very important to her that she have a farm that she was proud of.
I believe Betty was elected to the Oklahoma Pork Council Board of Directors in 1999 and served 1 term on the board. She was the first woman that was elected to the Board of Directors for the Oklahoma Pork Council, and ultimately the first to serve as an officer on the board. Betty had a very calming influence, I think, on the board, and what had been a very tumultuous time within the industry. When we were just going through the big battles at the state capitol, the board was still trying to sort out how all those things should play out. You had a change in leadership at the council with Gene Parsons stepping down and me being hired, and so there were just a lot of changes and things happening within the industry.
I'm proud to be an Oklahoma pork producer. Tax revenue from my hog farm helps support rural schools and hospitals, and I get to raise my family in a rural setting that we enjoy.
I'm proud that my job is all about environmental management. Protecting our natural resources is important to me.
As a pork producer, I'm proud to serve my community. I support my local high school booster clubs and help with the Boy Scouts.
We're Oklahoma pork producers, and we're proud to support our great state.
We were tickled to death when she would agree to be a part of some of our image campaign work. And if you go back and look at some of those early television ads and some of those early print ads, you can see that and you can hear it in her voice. You can hear when she talks about she's proud to be an Oklahoma pork producer. You see it on her face, and I'm telling you, we were able to make great headway with the image of the industry. Partly because, and it's not all about an advertisement, okay? The ads aren't it. They tell the story, but that's not what does it. What does it is people like Betty Baker that were committed to going out and doing everything the right way, and then living it, and then telling that story. You know, as a national environmental steward, helping us promote that. She was on the committee that reviewed other applicants for national environmental stewards down the road. She attended Pork Forum and represented Oklahoma. She just personified that image of, I'm an Oklahoman, I'm proud of who I am and what I do, and oh, by the way, I'm also a hog farmer. And she really was proud of that image.
Those commercials were important to her, and I think she would say that the fact that, hey, this is a growing industry, this is a good industry, it creates jobs. Betty and I always said, it could be in the worst, you could have the worst day of your life, and a cliche that we always had between us if we were washing out barns or whatever, and it's not really the worst day of your life, you're just working hard and it's hard manual labor. And I would tell her, and she knew what I was going to say, I would say, hey, we're feeding the world. You know, because she really did. We made a lot of protein for a lot of people at a good price, and that's what you have to do today to feed the populace. And she was a big believer in letting people know that, hey, the pork industry is here, it's here to stay, and it's doing good things.
And she was recognized nationally for her work as an environmental steward. She served on committees across the state, from the Rules Advisory Committee. I think she joined that Rules Advisory Committee for swine operations when the committee was first created, and I believe she served on it right up until the time of her passing.
Betty was excellent as a representative of the pork industry. Many of the meetings she would say, I'm not just here representing myself and my swine feeding operations. Numerous times she would say, I'm here representing the pork industry. The things that I say today are not only good for me, but they're also the best for the pork industry. I hope you all will consider them and you'll listen to me.
Obviously, she thought that's her business, you know, the pork business. And she was going to make sure that it was successful and that people knew all that she could, she would talk up the pork business. And it was very important for her to be on the boards, to stay active. And it did. It took her out of the loop. It took her away from the farm some, you know, because it involved days out where she wasn't wearing, you know, the medical smock or whatever, and on the end of a pressure washer. But that's what she did. She could do both. She could do both things, and she did. She was very instrumental. She talked to legislators. She gave comments during committee meetings. She was very attentive to, like you say, detail. In the fact that she knew it was very important. If we weren't going to represent ourselves in the hog business, nobody else was. Yeah, Betty established a central, if I can remember correctly, the Central Oklahoma Swine Growers Association, and it was important to her. She thought that communication, once again, was extremely important. Here we had all these growers all speckled around Holdenville, and yet we hardly ever got together, and maybe there was an occasional phone call, can you help me with this, or do you know the answer to that? But there was nothing like getting down and sitting and having a dinner, a good steak dinner somewhere, and people afterwards and before and during talking about their common problems. She liked recognition. She worked hard for it, but at the same time, she knew in the bigger picture, it just gave more exposure to the hog industry. Any light that could be shown on that, she thought it was good. She would be quick to thank everybody for helping her, and I mean everybody from the if she were still in the business, she'd be thanking the guys that show up and wash the barns. Oh, it means the world. It means that her memory is prolonged a little. She was such a special lady, and anything that we can do to show people and perhaps even inspire them through our words, because Betty inspired so many people to go the extra mile. I think, obviously, I'm prejudiced, but I think she's a very worthy candidate, and we are just so proud of her. I think that's the main thing, the bottom line. One day in August, we were in the hayfield, and if anybody, most of y'all have been out in the hayfield in the middle of August with no wind, it's a fairly oppressive place. And Betty and I, we had 2 tractors in the field. Betty was raking and I was baling. And of course, there was a little too much grass in one of the furrows, and I stuffed the round baler with too much, and it jammed. It was one of the worst jams I've ever had, and both Betty and I had to get up under the hay baler and clean it out. And of course, that's a greasy, just hurt your eyes, hurt your lungs, no wind. You have to come out every few minutes and kind of just walk around and get yourself back together and go back in there. And it went on forever and ever, and me, being the guy with the short temper, I must not have had enough sleep that night because I just went off. And I was so ready. You know, that agriculture is a love-hate thing. It really is. It can be the best of times, it can be the worst of times. And I guess it's just guys that do it. I don't know, I guess women do it too, but I was just so mad, and I was underneath the hay baler, and Betty was right next to me. And I said something about, and pardon my English here, but I said something like, "This is just hell on earth." And I yelled it as loud as I could. And then I yelled it again, and it kind of helped me. And we did get the baler unjammed, okay? So cut to an hour later, and Betty's raking and I'm baling, things are going great. Travis, to make it even better, Travis comes down. He was in high school, and he came down, and since he rolls the best bale in Hughes County, according to him, he got the tractor with the cab, the cokes, and the stereo. And I moved to the cutter, and Betty was still raking. And to make a long story short, we went on, and right at sundown, we finished up and probably rolled a couple of 100 bales. It was a good day. Everything stayed working. My family was there. It was just great. And as we all 3 pulled up to the entry to the field where our vehicles were, we shut them off at pretty much the same time. And if you've ever done that, or even with one tractor, you step down from the tractor, it was a quiet August evening. And the temp had probably only gone from 98 to 91. But it seemed like, quote, you know, it was much cooler then. So we went over, Betty and I went over to the tailgate of the truck and popped a couple of beers, and I was just sitting there, and Travis was there, and of course he wasn't drinking, but at the same time, he probably had a Coke or whatever. At the same time, Betty and I were just enjoying the evening, and I said, "Man, this is great." And I think I even used the word perfect. And she looked straight at me holding that beer and looked me in the eye and said, "Yeah," she said, "it's kind of like heaven, isn't it?" And that really told me what Betty was about. And if you knew Betty, that's a pretty good Betty story. We had a few plaques or sayings in our house that her friends had given us, and maybe my friends too, and we had put them up. But we had never really bought any ourselves. But Betty bought this one. I asked her later, like a year later, it was in our kitchen. I said, "Did you buy that?" And she said, "Oh yeah." And I said, "Does it mean a lot to you?" And she said, it means everything to me. The credo, it's a simple thought, but if everybody did this, there's a reason why everybody doesn't do this. Life was not meant to be a journey to the grave in a pretty and well-preserved body, but rather to skid in broadside, thoroughly used up, totally worn out, and loudly proclaiming, "Wow, what a ride." That was Betty's credo, and she lived it.